Hi, I'm Green Senator Christine Milne. I was first elected to the Tasmanian State Parliament in 1989, and I was an independent then. I became part of the Greens Party when it was formed, and I led the Tasmanian Greens through much of the 1990s. During that time, I was in balance of power with a Labor minority government between 1989 and 92, and a Liberal minority government between 1996 and 1998. I'm therefore somewhat amazed when people talk about balance of power politics as being something that would be undesirable. Because my experience is that the most democratic time in a parliament is when no one party has all the power. The big criticism of the Howard government in this last term of office has been that it's had total control, absolute power in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate. What that's meant is it can ram anything it likes through the Parliament regardless of how fair or how just, even how accurate it is, because the government doesn't have to accept amendments from anyone. The decision is already made. The last day of the Senate sitting before this election, the government sent home the House of Representatives before the Senate had even finished debating the legislation, because it knew it wasn't going to accept any amendments from the Senate, no matter how sensible, and so it didn't even bother. That's the kind of democracy Australia has had under the Howard government. The great thing about no party having all the power is that every party is in balance of power. There will be combinations of all kinds. Liberal and Labor will vote together and have a majority of votes probably 80 to 90% of the time. Then one of the major parties will need the cooperation of the minor parties for other pieces of legislation. In balance of power between 1989 and 92, the Greens in Tasmania were able to negotiate a doubling of the size of the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area. It's a World Heritage Site. It's now the backbone of Tasmania, clean, green and clever. We also negotiated freedom of information legislation, which was some of the best legislation in the country at that particular time. Between 1996 and 98, we had to contend in Tasmania with the Port Arthur massacre. It was a terrible time, a huge trauma for the community. And the best thing about balance of power is that it brought all of the parties into the room to talk about how we would respond to that crisis. And out of it came a tripartite process that negotiated gun law reform. We also had the same kinds of processes and collaboration and negotiation that achieved gay law reform in Tasmania. We went from the worst legislation in the country to the best. We also negotiated an apology to the stolen generation. It was the only Liberal government in the country to say sorry. And it was one of the most dignified times I ever have spent in a parliament. It was amazing. We brought the Indigenous people onto the floor of the House, and there, in the most dignified fashion, amazingly, you had the leaders of the three political parties getting up and saying sorry, and the Indigenous people responding. There was also a time in the lead up to the Constitutional Convention when the Tasmanian lower house voted for Australia to become a republic. When everybody has to negotiate, you get collaboration, you get real democracy, you get everybody's views taken into account, and you can't get those backroom deals that majority governments do with some of the big developers, where the developers give them a political donation and it's returned in kind with legislation rammed through both houses and no questions asked. Backroom deals are off the agenda in balance of power politics. The Greens have had experience of balance of power. I'm a great supporter of negotiation and collaboration. and the Greens in balance of power in the Senate would exercise that balance of power just as responsibly as the other parties who would all share it.